Tonight, a nationwide search for two missing children has come to a gruesome end. Family members confirm that the remains found on Chad Daybell's rural property in Idaho are the bodies of his stepchildren.
Chad Daybell sat emotionless as a jury of his peers sealed his fate. And this morning, the so-called Doomsday author sentenced to death.
Really? What happens to people when they say God told them to do something? They lock them up.
Well,
I'm locked up.
Lori Daybell had apocalyptic religious beliefs. She believed doomsday was coming and that her two children needed to die. She and her husband killed them and buried their remains. And now her only son is trying to cut ties with her. Hi, I'm Katie Ring, a true crime analyst, self-defense instructor, and advocate for victims. And this is Crimehouse Daily, your weekday true crime companion, a Crimehouse original powered by Pave Studios. We follow the cases making headlines now, where justice is still unfolding. This is a First Watch episode bringing you today's biggest crime stories. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel at Crimehouse Daily so you never miss an episode. This episode discusses active criminal cases and breaking news. The information we share is based on what's publicly available at the time of recording and may change as new evidence comes to light. We aim to inform, not to decide guilt or innocence. So everyone mentioned is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Today, we're covering two major cases in the news. The first story follows a woman named Lori Daybell, a mother convicted of killing her own kids. She just sent her only surviving son, Colby Ryan, a message from jail. She sent it through an encrypted message to a journalist, who then showed it to Colby at CrimeCon. The second case is about a man who killed his wife in Massachusetts. And Michael Proctor, the co-lead investigator on the case, might have something to do with it. Before we get into the main story, I want to briefly touch on something I saw on People today. Allegedly, Brian Kohberger, the man responsible for murdering 4 University of Idaho students in November of 2022, stalked 2 other college students before carrying out the Idaho murders. The women were students at Washington State University, and they told police in interviews that Kohberger would show up to their workplaces every day. One woman said she heard a mysterious knock on her door, called her husband, and then realized the person fled from her house. It happened again, and when the husband came back to check on her, he saw a white car driving away. And Brian Kohberger drove a white Hyundai Elantra. We did an entire First Watch episode on the new details being revealed in the Idaho murder case, so make sure to check that out on our YouTube page at Crimehouse Daily. Our first story today has made a ton of headlines over the past few years. We're talking about Lori Vallow Daybell, aka the Doomsday Mother. Over the past couple years, she's been convicted of killing 2 of her own children, Tylee and JJ, with the help of her new husband, Chad Daybell. Not only that, but she was also found guilty of conspiring to kill her ex-husband, Charles Vallow, and her nephew, Brandon Boudreaux. Her husband, Chad, was also convicted of killing his wife, Tammy. Chad was sentenced to death for his crimes, and Lori has already been sentenced to life in prison, but she's trying to fight her convictions. Lori has filed an appeal and recently appeared virtually in court as part of that process. So this story is far from over, but in the end, what matters most is that the victims receive justice. Charles Vallow was a loving father who cared deeply for his kids, whether they were his biological children or not. This included Tylee and JJ, innocent kids with promising lives ahead of them, who were betrayed by the people entrusted with their care. 2 other innocent people were Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell, and Lori's nephew, Brandon Boudreaux, who were also targeted by Lori and Chad so they could live out their dark fantasies. It's hard to comprehend how anyone could be capable of doing something like this, but we're going to try and understand what brought us to this point, starting at the very beginning. Lori Vallow was born on June 26, 1973 in Rialto, California. Her family belongs to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and Lori is passionate about her faith, to say the least. She loves to read the Book of Mormon, and she's captivated by the stories of heroism and sacrifice. She learned a lot from these teachings, but when Lori becomes an adult, she has to learn some painful lessons on her own. Throughout her late teens and early 20s, Lori ended up in a string of abusive relationships, and at 23, she had already married and divorced twice. In 1996, Lori had her first son named Colby with her second husband. In 2001, 28-year-old Lori and 5-year-old Colby were living in the town of Driftwood, Texas, where she met 43-year-old Joe Ryan. She and Joe quickly fell in love and got married. In September 2002, Lori and Joe welcomed a baby girl they named Tylee. But after her birth, things went south. According to Lori, Joe has an explosive temper, and he allegedly directs most of his rage at Colby. But Lori says he goes after her as well. Eventually, Lori dives deeper into religion as a form of escape and starts bringing Colby and Tylee to church all the time. And at home, she hides away in a locked room, studying scripture. It's at this point that her beliefs start to get twisted. Some LDS Christians believe certain people can receive messages from God and his angels, and pretty soon, Lori is convinced that she is one of them. As a way to harness this power, she empties a room in the house, fills it with nothing but mirrors, and spends all of her time dancing naked to religious music. Lori starts believing that she can talk to the dead and that her daughter Tylee is the reincarnation of her late sister. However, mainstream Mormons don't believe in reincarnation, and Lori knows that, so she keeps her spiritual journey to herself. For now. Unfortunately, her faith doesn't protect her from the alleged abuse she and her children are experiencing at home. And in 2004, when Colby was 8 years old, he allegedly told Lori that Joe had been sexually abusing him. After hearing this, Lori leaves her husband, and by August of that year, she and the kids move back in with her parents, who are now living in San Antonio, Texas, and she files for divorce. By 2005, 32-year-old Lori thought she might be ready for love again. And that same year, she met a wealthy financial planner named Charles Vallow, and they got married in 2006. Charles is immediately taken with Lori and even converts to the Mormon faith for her. Charles also stands by Lori when she takes her ex-husband Joe to court for his alleged sexual abuse of not only Colby, but Tylee as well. But in July of 2007, Joe was found not guilty, and Lori does not take this well. Apparently, neither does her brother, Alex Cox, who wants to take matters into his own hands. Lori tells Alex where he can find Joe, and Alex tracks him down in a parking lot where he attacks Joe with a stun gun. He's charged with aggravated assault and spends 3 months in jail. After that, things settle down a little, and Lori just wants to focus on her new happy family, which continues to grow. In 2013, she and Charles adopt his 1-year-old nephew, JJ, when his parents are unable to care for him. They move to Arizona, and Alex joins them when he's released from prison. But a few years later, the mood in the Vallow household starts to shift. Even though Charles has converted to LDS, Lori doesn't think he spiritually measures up to her. She feels like she's getting closer to God each day and that Charles can't keep up. By 2017, Lori delves into doomsday prepping, which has become a niche Mormon subculture. Lori becomes obsessed with a man named Chad Daybell, who is the main leader of this movement. Chad claims to have spiritual visions that allow him to predict the end of the world, and Lori is desperate to meet him. So in October of 2018, she attends a Doomsday Prepper conference in Utah, where Chad's giving the headlining speech. Lori goes to a meet and greet, and as soon as their eyes meet, they both know. They are meant to be together. Chad even wrote a short story about his and Lori's first meeting. Let's listen to it.
When their hands touched, he felt a shock pass through him and his heart started beating fast. He had glimpses of them walking dusty paths together, and he realized they had been married during the life of Jesus Christ, and they had been very close to him. At this time, their spirits could not be restrained any longer, and a long-awaited makeout session took place in that lobby.
It doesn't matter to them that they're married. The more they talk, the more Chad and Lori fall for each other. After the conference, Lori and Chad stay in touch long distance, and Chad eventually reveals something to Lori over email. He says he has psychic abilities that allow him to see whether someone has, quote, light or dark spirit. He says people with light spirits are the ones God wants to survive the apocalypse and witness the second coming of Christ. And people with dark spirits have been possessed by demons. And things only get more sinister from there, because Chad says he believes anyone whose spirit is too dark needs to be eradicated, and that it's his job to gather all of the light spirits and form a protective community. It's clear Chad wants to start a cult, and he's willing to kill people to make it happen. And Lori is in. But apparently they both skipped over the part in the 10 Commandments where it says, "Thou shalt not kill." But I digress. Lori is so dedicated to Chad's mission that she doesn't even care when Chad says that her own kids and her husband are dark spirits. Meanwhile, Charles can sense that something is wrong, so he reads through Lori's emails with Chad and is horrified. He wants to save his family from harm, but he also believes that he can still get his wife back. However, when he tells Lori's family about what he found, they don't believe him. Lori has convinced them that Charles is cheating on her, and this is his way of covering it up. She uses this opportunity to distance herself from her family even more and tells Charles that she doesn't care about them anymore, and that all she cares about is her, quote, mission. By 2019, Lori has completely abandoned her family except for her brother Alex, who is also part of her and Chad's cult. Together, they'll do anything for the mission, even if that means killing their own family. In the summer of 2019, Lori and Charles Vallow are in the middle of a divorce. And after what he discovered on Lori's computer, he is also fighting for the custody of their kids, 16-year-old Tylee and 7-year-old JJ. Lori also has a son, Colby, but at this point, he's an adult and is living on his own. But Charles faces some challenges because Tylee is Lori's daughter from another marriage, and Lori won't let her go. However, Lori agrees to let Charles take care of JJ. On July 10th, Charles goes to Lori's house to pick him up, but she has a guest that day, her brother, Alex. And once Charles is inside, Alex grabs a gun and shoots him twice in the chest. When the police arrive, Alex claims that he'd shot Charles in self-defense, and at the time, that claim helps him avoid arrest. But 2 days later, the autopsy shows that it's unlikely Charles was charging at Alex when he was killed. The authorities decide to look into the matter further, but their investigation hits a snag a few weeks later when Alex and Lori moved to Rexburg, Idaho to be closer to their cult leader, Chad Daybell. But before the police can piece everything together, the mystery deepens. In September 2019, Lori's kids, Tylee and JJ, seem to go missing. Lori says that Tylee is taking classes at Brigham Young University in Idaho, and that JJ is staying with family. But nobody has heard from them directly, and their loved ones fear that something bad has happened. Lori's son, Colby, is especially worried Tylee is texting him back, but he gets a gut feeling that the messages aren't really coming from her because they don't sound like her. In October, even more violence befalls their family when someone tries to shoot Lori's niece's husband, Brandon Boudreaux. Luckily, they miss him, and the bullet hits the frame of his car right above the driver's side window. But he believes Lori is involved. Brandon and his wife Melanie, Lori's niece, had become estranged after Melanie joined Lori's cult. Brandon was understandably not happy about his wife being lured into their cult, and he thinks Lori tried to kill him for his life insurance money. When police look into it, they find out that the shooter's vehicle was registered to Charles Vallow. Brandon is pretty sure that Lori loaned her car to her brother Alex and that he was the one who tried to kill him. But Brandon wasn't the only target. On October 19th, Chad's wife, Tammy, mysteriously dies. Chad claims she died in her sleep, but Tammy's family isn't buying it. Chad ends up turning down an autopsy for Tammy, which gives him access to her life insurance money. And he and Lori use that money to take a trip to Hawaii, where they get married 2 weeks after Tammy's death. While Lori and Chad are off frolicking in Hawaii, no one has heard or seen Tylee and JJ. By late November, it's clear that Lori is hiding something about the kids, and on the 26th, the police are called to do a welfare check on them. When the officers arrive at Lori's townhouse, there's no sign of Tylee or JJ. Lori once again says that Tylee is taking college classes and that JJ is currently staying with their friend, a woman named Melanie Gibb, in Arizona. But when the police contact Melanie, she says JJ isn't with her and that Lori and Chad asked her to lie about it. From there, a full-on investigation ensues, and detectives give Lori a deadline of January 30th, 2020, to produce her children. But before that date comes, there's another development. In December, Lori's brother Alex dies mysteriously in his home. His death is determined to be from natural causes, but his autopsy shows high amounts of Narcan in his system, which is an anti-overdose medication. Investigators suspect that he may have overdosed on purpose in order to avoid testifying against his sister. But even without testimony from Alex, the authorities are closing in on Lori and Chad. When her deadline comes and goes and there's still no sign of the kids, Lori is arrested and her bail is set at $1 million. From there, the search to find them ramps up. They discover 3 major pieces of information. First, on September 9th, 2019, Alex Cox went to Chad Daybell's property for about 2 hours, which also happened to be the last day anyone saw Tylee or JJ. Second, that same day, Chad texted Tammy, who was still alive at the time, and told her that he had to bury a raccoon in their backyard. Third, on September 23rd, which is right around the time Tylee disappeared, Alex returned to the property. This time, he was there for about 17 minutes. Finally, on June 9th, 2020, about 4 months after Lori's arrest, the authorities obtain a warrant to search Chad's backyard, and when they start digging, it doesn't take them long to find 2 black garbage bags, each filled with what appears to be burned human remains. When Chad sees them unwrap the garbage bags, he gets into his car and speeds off, but officers block the road and quickly place him under arrest. The next day, the medical examiner confirms that the remains were Tylee and JJ. In May of 2021, Lori and Chad are each charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Tylee and JJ. But that's not all. The authorities believe Chad and Lori also killed their spouses so they could be together. Not just so they could fulfill their holy destiny, but so they could be set for life with the insurance payouts. All of the evidence supports this theory, and Chad is charged with Tammy's murder. Lori is also charged with conspiring to murder Charles, as well as her nephew, Brandon Boudreaux. A judge decides that Lori and Chad will be tried separately, and their cases play out in the spring of 2023 until the summer of 2025. And the worst decision anyone could possibly make, Lori decides to represent herself. And unsurprisingly, both of them are found guilty on all charges. For his crimes, Chad is sentenced to death. Meanwhile, Lori is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for murdering her kids and receives 2 more life sentences for conspiring to kill Charles and Brandon. But Lori refuses to accept her fate, and in August of 2025, she files an appeal for both the first-degree murder charges and conspiracy to commit murder. We'll be sure to update you on all major developments with this case, and be sure to follow us at Crimehouse 24/7 for breaking news. Next, we're diving into another mysterious disappearance that has investigators eyeing the victim's husband and the involvement of a law enforcement officer who could potentially jeopardize the entire case. Our second story today involves a Massachusetts couple named Brian and Anna Walsh, and a disgraced former state trooper whose name you may remember. On January 4th, 2023, Anna Walsh was reported missing by her employer. When the police arrived at the Walsh's house for a welfare check, Anna's husband, Bryan, seemed to be very helpful, but he would eventually be arrested for her murder. He's scheduled to go to trial in October 2025, but the involvement of a former state trooper, Michael Proctor, who was fired for his misconduct in the Karen Reed trial, could throw the whole case into question. So how did we get here? Let's go back to the beginning of 2023. Brian and Anna Walsh are going through a lot of problems, but these weren't just normal couple problems. Brian was racking up a laundry list of legal issues. In 2016, Brian was accused of selling 2 fake Andy Warhol paintings for $80,000. In 2021, he agreed to plead guilty, although 2 years in, he has yet to be sentenced. But there is more. In 2018, Brian's dad passed away, and he was accused of destroying the will when he found out he wasn't in it. Not only is Brian in hot water, he is also on house arrest while waiting his sentencing, which you can imagine is taking a toll on his family, and particularly his marriage. Meanwhile, Anna is trying to balance her career as a real estate executive, which requires a lot of travel between their home in Cohasset, Massachusetts, and Washington, D.C., and raising their 3 young sons. It's a lot for one person to handle, especially while your husband is on house arrest. Prosecutors are claiming Brian became suspicious of Anna and had his mom hire a private investigator to follow her to D.C. days before her disappearance. But Walsh is claiming that he told his mom that she was crazy for hiring a PI and that he never suspected his wife, which is questionable considering court documents have revealed that Brian Googled the name of her alleged lover multiple times. A friend of Anna's also told investigators that her marriage was strained and that Anna had given Brian some sort of ultimatum about the resolution of his criminal case and wanted the kids to be with her in D.C. On Wednesday, January 4th, 2023, Anna was supposed to be at her office in Washington, D.C., but she never showed up. Her colleagues got worried and notified the police, so officers in Cohasset went to the Walsh's home for a wellness check, and they immediately noticed something suspicious. The back seats of Brian's car are pushed down, and there's a plastic liner on top of them, like he was transporting something messy. However, those suspicions get pushed aside for the moment because Bryan is eager to help. While speaking to police, Bryan gives officers a detailed timeline of events between January 1st and 4th. He claims that on the morning of January 1st, Anna ordered an Uber to the airport for her flight to DC. That same day, Bryan says he left the kids with a sitter, hung out with his mom, and ran a few errands. Then Bryan hung out with his kids for the next couple of days. Police thank him for his statement and start to search the area, including the woods around the Walsh's home, but there's no signs of Anna. 2 days later, on January 5th, there's a shocking development. A house in Cohasset that Anna owns catches on fire. Thankfully, the people she was renting to noticed smoke and flames in the attic right away and called 911. So they were able to put it out quickly with no injuries or damage. The fire has since been ruled an accident due to faulty piping, but when the news initially got out, it raised a lot of eyebrows, leaving some people wondering if it was actually intentional as a way to destroy evidence in the search for Anna. But it's not long before there's another twist in the case. On January 7th, police receive an anonymous email that claims Anna was caught up in some shady business dealings and is being held captive. Her kidnappers want $127,000 in exchange for her safe return. But detectives don't think the threat is real because the email doesn't give any instructions for making the trade, which makes it a pretty bad ransom demand. It all seems like a poorly executed cover-up. Detectives start to wonder who would want to throw them off their scent, and the suspicions turn to Anna's husband, Bryan. They begin looking into his alibi more thoroughly, which leads them to surveillance footage at the stores he said he had gone to. Pretty soon, they realize these may not have been harmless errands. Because on January 2nd, Bryan went to Home Depot, where he purchased about $450 worth of cleaning supplies, including mops, buckets, drop cloths, along with a hacksaw and cleaning solution. From there, they check cell phone records and discover that Anna's phone pinged near the Cohasset home on January 1st and 2nd, which would mean Bryan lied about her leaving for DC on the 1st. There is also no record of the Uber he said she ordered. On January 8th, investigators obtain a warrant to search the Walsh's Cohasset home and find bloodstains and a bloody knife in the basement. Bryan is arrested that same day and charged with misleading a police investigation. He pleads not guilty, and his bail is set at $500,000. While he's in custody, authorities begin investigating him for murder. They look at Bryan's internet history and find some incriminating Google searches beginning on January 1st, including things like dismemberment and best ways to dispose of a body, how long before a body starts to smell, and hacksaw, best tool to dismember. In the days that follow, police find data on Bryan's phone showing him driving to multiple apartment buildings. And when the police pull surveillance footage, they see Bryan throwing away multiple heavy garbage bags. Unfortunately, by the time they get to one of the apartments, the trash had already been taken and incinerated. But they did find a few bags in others that contained a hacksaw, bloody towels, and some of Anna's belongings. Authorities don't release a ton of other details, but they now believe Bryan killed Anna, dismembered her body, and disposed of her remains in multiple dumpsters throughout the area. They charge him with murder and mishandling human remains. Bryan pleads not guilty, which means the prosecution is going to have to prove these allegations in court. The first question they have to answer is, why would Bryan kill his wife? Over the next few months, investigators discovered that Anna had a $2.7 million life insurance policy. Between Bryan's legal and financial issues, the alleged affair, and alleged ultimatum, Bryan now has some serious motive. While they build the case, Bryan is sentenced to 37 months in prison and 3 years of supervised release for his art fraud conviction. So he will be staying behind bars until his murder trial, which is scheduled to begin on October 20th, 2025. Despite not having a body, prosecutors have endless amounts of evidence, and things are not looking good for Bryan's defense. But they get a glimmer of hope when Trooper Michael Proctor is fired for his conduct in the Karen Reed case, because it just so happens that Michael Proctor was also the lead investigator in Anna's case. But all of this came out after Anna disappeared. So back in 2023, while authorities were looking into Anna's disappearance and murder, Proctor was still on the force. And now Brian Walsh's lawyers wonder if Proctor mishandled this investigation too. Like with Karen Reed's case, they think Proctor's text messages could contain evidence that he was biased against Bryan. The thing is, all of Proctor's text messages are being held by the Norfolk County DA's office. That's the county where Karen's trial took place, and where Bryan will also go to trial. The records were supposed to be destroyed 30 days after Karen's trial wrapped, but Bryan's attorneys petitioned for them to be preserved. Now, they're in a battle with the DA's office over the records. Bryan's attorneys want to see them, but the DA's office wants them destroyed. The final decision rests in the judge's hands. Hopefully, each side can get the evidence they need, because at the center of this all, a woman was murdered, and Anna Walsh deserves to get justice. And as always, we will keep you updated on all of the latest details. So be sure to check back for more and follow us at Crimehouse 24/7 for breaking news. What did you think of today's case? Drop your theories in the comments. And follow us at Crimehouse 24/7 on TikTok and Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube at Crimehouse Daily. For ad-free listening, join Crimehouse Plus on Apple Podcasts. You stay curious, and I'll stay on the case. I'll see you tonight.